I've spent 37 years listening to people tell me the stories they couldn't tell anyone else. And if there's one thing I learned in all that time, it's this: we always know. Somewhere deep in the body, beneath the explanations and the reassurances and the desperate need to believe, we always know. The question is never whether the truth was there. The question is how long we can survive pretending it isn't. Today, I want to tell you about a woman I'll never forget. She sat across from me on a Tuesday afternoon in late September, her hands folded so tightly in her lap that her knuckles had gone white. She hadn't come to see me about infidelity. She'd come because she couldn't sleep, because her chest felt tight all the time, because she kept having what she called irrational thoughts that she needed help managing. But here's what she didn't say in that first session. She'd been managing those thoughts for 11 months. 11 months of explaining away the distance. 11 months of believing him when he said she was overthinking things. 11 months of friendship with the woman he swore was nothing more than a colleague, a friend, someone she had no reason to worry about. Until the day that woman called her. Not to confess, not to apologize, but to ask, with what I can only describe as genuine confusion, why she hadn't been invited to their anniversary dinner. Let me ask you something, and I want you to really sit with this. Have you ever felt the ground disappear beneath you? Not metaphorically, but that actual sensation in your body when reality rewrites itself so fast that your nervous system can't keep up? That's what betrayal does. It doesn't just break your heart. It breaks the story you've been telling yourself about your own life. And that's what I saw in her eyes that day. Not just pain, but the terrifying realization that she'd been living in a story that wasn't real. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'd love to know who's here with me today. Her name was Lauren, though she told me I could change it if I ever shared her story. She was 41 years old, a high school English teacher with 2 kids and a husband she'd been with since college. 20 years together. 20 years of what she thought was a solid, if sometimes routine, marriage. The kind where you know each other's coffee orders and finish each other's sentences and occasionally forget to really look at each other because you're so busy just living. She told me that the friendship had started about a year earlier. Her husband, David, worked in marketing, and this woman, I'll call her Monica, had joined his team as a creative director. Lauren had met her at a company barbecue that summer. She remembered thinking Monica was warm, funny, maybe a little too polished for her taste, but harmless. David had mentioned her occasionally after that. Monica had great ideas for the campaign. Monica was going through a divorce. Monica had recommended this restaurant they should try. I remember feeling pleased, Lauren told me, her voice so quiet I had to lean forward to hear her. Pleased that he had a friend at work. That's what I told myself. He seemed happier, more energized. I thought it was good for him. Here's what happens in the psychology of denial. Our brains are wired to maintain coherence in our worldview. When information threatens the fundamental stories we tell ourselves about our marriages, our partners, our own judgment, the mind will work incredibly hard to explain it away. This isn't weakness. This is survival. Because accepting certain truths before we're ready can feel like stepping off a cliff with no ground in sight. Lauren had noticed small things. Of course she had. The way David's face changed when Monica's name came up, a brightness and animation that hadn't been there for her in years. The texts that came through during dinner, during movies, during their son's baseball games. The night he'd come home 3 hours late from a team meeting and she'd smelled perfume on his jacket. She asked him about it. She asked him directly, and he looked at like I was crazy. He said Monica had hugged her goodbye, that it was a European thing, she was just affectionate. And I believed him, or I chose to believe him because the alternative was... She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. The thing about just a friend is that sometimes it's true. Marriages need space for friendships, for separate lives, for connections that don't threaten the foundation of the relationship. But other times, just a friend is the permission slip we give our partners to hide in plain sight. It's the phrase that lets them keep texting at midnight, that explains away the laughter you don't hear anymore when they talk to you, that justifies the sudden interest in their appearance, the new cologne, the distance in their eyes, even when they're standing right next to you. Lauren had given him that permission slip, and he used it. The texts got more frequent, the late nights got later. Their anniversary came and went with dinner at a restaurant she'd picked because he'd been too swamped at work to plan anything. She'd watched him check his phone twice during the meal and said nothing. That night, lying in bed beside him, she felt his body next to her and recognized with a sick clarity that she'd never felt more alone. I kept thinking I was being paranoid, she told me. Everyone kept telling me I was being paranoid. My sister said I was stressed. My best friend said all marriages go through phases. Even my mother said maybe I needed to be more understanding, that he worked hard, that men need their space. So I told myself that's all it was, a phase, his space, my paranoia. But here's what I learned over all those years of listening. The body keeps the score even when the mind refuses to do it. Lauren couldn't sleep. Her chest felt tight. She started having panic attacks at work. Her first one came during a staff meeting out of nowhere, her heart racing so fast that she thought she was dying. Her doctor prescribed anxiety medication. She took it. She still couldn't sleep. Because somewhere beneath the explanations and the reassurances, her nervous system was screaming the truth her mind couldn't face yet. Her body knew what her brain was protecting her from knowing. It was their daughter who finally said it out loud. 15 years old, standing in the kitchen one Saturday morning while David was at the gym, or said he was at the gym. Lauren was making pancakes, trying to maintain normalcy, trying to be present, even though she felt like she was watching her own life from behind glass. "Mom," her daughter said, not looking up from her phone, "is Dad cheating on you?" Lauren dropped the spatula, just stood there frozen while her daughter looked at her with those clear, unforgiving teenage eyes that hadn't learned how to pretend yet. "Why would you ask that?" Lauren had whispered. And her daughter had shrugged, still not looking at her. "Because he's different, and you're sad all the time, and I'm not stupid." Out of the mouths of babes, as they say. Sometimes it takes someone with less invested in the story to see the story clearly. That night, Lauren had confronted David. Really confronted him, not the gentle questions she'd asked before, the ones designed to get the answer she wanted. She asked him directly if he was having an affair with Monica. And he was offended, genuinely, convincingly offended. How could she think that? How could she accuse him of something so horrible? Monica was his friend, his colleague, nothing more. He was disappointed in Lauren for letting her insecurity poison their marriage. He actually said that, your insecurity. She apologized. Can you imagine? She apologized to him. Have you ever done that? Apologized for your own intuition? Let me know in the comments. You're not alone. 3 weeks later, Lauren was folding laundry in the bedroom when David's phone rang on the dresser. He was in the shower. The name on the screen was Monica. Lauren stared at that phone for a long time. Her hands were shaking. Her mouth had gone dry. Every part of her knew that picking that phone up would change everything. That once she crossed that line, there was no going back to not knowing. She picked it up. "Hello?" There was a pause. Then Monica's voice, bright and friendly. "Oh, hi, is David there?" "He's in the shower," Lauren said. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears. Flat, distant. "Oh, okay, no problem. Hey, I was just calling to ask, and I know this is silly. I probably got the date wrong, but I thought he said your anniversary dinner was tonight. I had it in my calendar, and I never got the invite, so I figured I'd messed up the—" She didn't hear the rest. The words had stopped making sense. Anniversary dinner? Invite? Calendar? "Why," Lauren said slowly, "would you be invited to our anniversary dinner?" Another pause, longer this time, and then in Monica's voice, something changed. a carefulness that hadn't been there before. Wait, did he not tell you? About the group thing? He said you were all doing a group celebration with some of the couples from. There is no group thing, Lauren said. And even as she said it, even as the words came out of her mouth, she felt the last piece of her denial crumble into dust. There is no group thing. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. "Oh my God," Monica whispered. "Oh my God. He told you knew. He said you were fine with us being friends. He said—" Lauren hung up. Here's what happens in the moment of betrayal's confirmation. Time fractures. The present moment becomes unbearable, so the mind tries to escape into the past, rewriting every memory, reinterpreting every conversation, seeing all the— "You felt taken for granted?" Lauren repeated. Her voice was still so calm, too calm. "So you started an affair." "It's not an affair," he said. We've only... It's mostly just talking, Lauren. I swear, it's not what you think." But it didn't matter what they had or hadn't done physically. That's what people don't understand about infidelity. The body is just the evidence. The real betrayal happens long before any physical line is crossed. It happens in the secret texts and the lies and the emotional energy that gets redirected away from your partner and toward someone else. It happens when you start sharing your real self with someone who isn't your person. When you start seeking comfort and excitement and understanding from someone you've never promised your life to. The real betrayal is the choice made over and over again to protect the affair instead of the marriage. Lauren asked him if he loved Monica. He didn't answer right away. And in that pause, Lauren told me, she saw their entire future collapse. Because if he'd said no immediately, if he'd said it was just a stupid mistake, just ego and midlife crisis and meaningless attraction, maybe that would have been survivable. Maybe. But he didn't say no. "I don't know," he said finally. "I don't know what I feel." She told him to leave. He tried to argue, to explain, to ask for time to figure things out. She told him if he wasn't out of the house in an hour, she was calling his mother and telling her everything. He left. The next few days were a blur. Lauren moved through them like a ghost, telling the kids their father was away on business, going to work and teaching her classes on autopilot, coming home and staring at the walls. Her sister came to stay with her. Her best friend brought food she couldn't eat. At night, alone in their bed, she'd reach for her phone and start typing texts to David. Angry texts, pleading texts, texts that asked why and how could you, and what did I do wrong? She never sent them. Because here's what I've learned about betrayal. The worst part isn't the pain. It's the way it makes you doubt your own reality. Lauren kept going back through their entire relationship, questioning everything. Had he ever really loved her? Had their whole marriage been a lie? What had she missed, and how had she missed it? And did that mean she couldn't trust her own judgment about anything? The psychological term for this is reality testing. When trust is shattered, we lose our ability to know what's real. We question not just the person who betrayed us, but ourselves, our memories, our instincts, our worth. Lauren came to see me because she couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, and couldn't stop obsessing over the details. What had Monica given him that she hadn't? When had it started? Really started? How many times had he lied to her face? How many times had she stood in the same room with both of them, smiling like an idiot, while they shared some secret she wasn't part of? "I keep thinking about the barbecue," she told me, "that first time I met her. I remember David introducing us, and Monica shook my hand, and I thought she seemed nice. I thought maybe we could all be friends. And the whole time, was he already thinking about her that way? Was I already the fool?" I've heard some version of that question 100 times. Was I already the fool? And here's what I always say. You weren't a fool for trusting. You were a person in a relationship doing what people in relationships do, extending trust, assuming good faith, choosing to believe the person you love. That's not foolish. That's human. The fool isn't the person who trusted. The fool is the person who betrayed that trust. But knowing that intellectually and feeling it in your bones are two different things. Lauren and David separated. She filed for divorce 3 months after Monica's phone call. It wasn't a decision she made lightly, and it wasn't one she made quickly. There were therapy sessions, individual and couples. There were long conversations with friends and family, all of whom had opinions on what she should do. There were moments when David begged for another chance, swore the affair was over, promised he'd do whatever it took to rebuild what he'd broken. But here's what Lauren told me, sitting in my office 8 months after that first session, looking different than the woman who'd walked in with white knuckles and sleepless eyes. I realized that even if he'd done everything right from that moment forward, I would never stop wondering, never stop checking his phone, never stop analyzing his face when he talked about work or his friends or where he'd been. I would never trust him again. And that's no way to live. She was right. Some breaks can't be fixed. Not because forgiveness is impossible. Forgiveness is always possible if you choose it. But because trust, once shattered completely, leaves pieces too small to glue back together. You can forgive someone and still choose not to live with them. You can release the anger and still protect yourself from future harm. These things aren't contradictory. They're just honest. The divorce was messy. Divorces involving infidelity usually are. There was anger and blame and lawyers and fights about custody and who got what. David moved in with Monica for a while, though Lauren heard through mutual friends that relationship fell apart within 6 months. Apparently, the excitement of an affair doesn't translate well to ordinary life. Who could have guessed? But here's what happened to Lauren that I didn't expect, that maybe she didn't expect either. She got better. Not right away, not in some Hollywood montage where she gets a haircut and joins a gym and finds herself. It was slower than that, messier than that. She started sleeping again. The panic attacks stopped. She joined a divorce support group and met other women who'd been through similar experiences. She started saying no to things she didn't want to do and yes to things that brought her joy. She took a pottery class. She went on a trip with her sister. She let her kids see her cry sometimes, and she let her kids see her laugh too. She told me, I learned something important. I learned that I'm stronger than I thought I was. Not because I survived the betrayal. Surviving isn't the achievement. But because I chose to leave. Because I listened to my gut even when everyone was telling me I should try harder, forgive faster, think about the kids, think about the history, think about starting over at my age. I chose myself, and I'd never really done that before. There's a particular kind of grief that comes with infidelity. It's not just grief for the relationship you lost. It's grief for the relationship you thought you had. The past you thought was real gets rewritten, and that's a unique kind of pain. Lauren had to mourn not just her marriage's future, but its past too. She also had to unlearn some things. She had to unlearn the belief that she was responsible for David's choices. She had to unlearn the idea that if she'd been different, prettier, sexier, more fun, less stressed, more understanding, he wouldn't have strayed. She had to unlearn the story that her worth was tied to whether someone chose to be faithful to her. Those are hard things to unlearn. Our culture teaches us, especially women, to look inward when relationships fail, to ask what we did wrong, to take responsibility for other people's betrayals. But David's affair wasn't about Lauren's inadequacy. It was about his character, his choices, his willingness to prioritize his own gratification over his commitments. Let me be clear about something. I'm not saying all marriages that face infidelity should end. Some couples do the hard work and come out the other side with something real and rebuilt. I've seen it happen. But it requires genuine remorse, not just regret at being caught. It requires radical honesty and years, not weeks or months, but years of rebuilding trust. It requires the person who strayed to understand the full weight of what they've done and to do the work to become trustworthy again. And it requires the betrayed partner to genuinely want to rebuild, not out of fear or obligation or the sunk cost fallacy, but because they believe the relationship is worth fighting for, and because they trust the person can change. Lauren didn't believe David could change. Or maybe she believed he could, but she no longer wanted to be the one watching to see if he would. And that's okay. That's more than okay. That's self-respect. Today, 4 years after Monica's phone call, Lauren is remarried. Her new husband is a middle school science teacher she met at a district training. They dated for 2 years before getting engaged. She told me she took it slow because she needed to trust herself again, needed to make sure she could read the signs, trust her intuition, choose well. The difference, she told me, is that with Mark, I never have to wonder. He's an open book. When something's bothering him, he tells me. When he's running late, he texts me. If a woman at work tries to get too friendly, he tells me about it, and we laugh. I'm not sitting around analyzing his phone or his face or his excuses. I don't have that knot in my stomach all the time. That's how I know this is different. That's how I know I chose right this time. I asked her if she ever talks to David anymore. They co-parent, she said, so there's communication about the kids. It's cordial, sometimes even friendly. She doesn't hate him anymore. That surprised her most of all, how the hate eventually burned itself out and left something quieter behind. Not love, not forgiveness exactly, just acceptance. He is who he is, he did what he did, and she's built a life that doesn't revolve around that pain anymore. Do you ever regret leaving? I asked her. She didn't hesitate. Never, not once. The only thing I regret is not trusting myself sooner. All those months I knew something was wrong and I talked myself out of it. That's the only part I'd change. Next time, I'll listen. Next time. There's optimism in that phrase. The belief that she'll know better, do better, trust herself more. And maybe she will. Or maybe life will throw her something she can't predict, something that challenges her in new ways. That's the nature of being human. We don't get to know the ending. We just get to choose how we show up. So here's what I want to leave you with today. If you're in that place where your gut is screaming at you and everyone around you is saying you're paranoid, listen to yourself. Your body knows things your mind doesn't want to face yet. That tightness in your chest, that sleeplessness, that low-grade anxiety you can't explain, that's not neurosis. That's information. And if you're on the other side of betrayal, trying to figure out how to move forward, know this. There's no right answer. Some people stay and rebuild. Some people leave and start over. Both can be right. Both can be brave. The only wrong choice is the one you make out of fear or guilt or what other people think you should do. You get to choose yourself. You get to trust your own judgment. You get to walk away from situations that require you to constantly doubt your reality. You get to build a life where you don't have to wonder. Lauren's story stayed with me all these years because of something she said in one of our last sessions. She said, I thought losing my marriage would destroy me, but it didn't. It changed me. And maybe that's better. Changed, not destroyed. That's the lesson. Betrayal doesn't have to be the end of your story. It can be the chapter where you learn to trust yourself, where you learn that you're capable of surviving hard things, where you learn that your worth isn't determined by someone else's inability to see it. We always know. Remember that. Somewhere in your body, beneath all the explanations and the desperation to believe, you always know. The question is just whether you're ready to listen. Thank you for being here with me today. If this story resonated with you or if you've been through something similar, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Sometimes just knowing we're not alone makes all the difference. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, send it their way. You never know what small act of kindness might help someone choose themselves. Until next time, take care of yourselves. You deserve more than you think you do. Trust me on that one.